Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever it is when you're watching this. Welcome back to Crosstalk. Last week we tackled a couple of questions, and hopefully we've kind of answered them. But if there's more questions regarding what we've answered last week, then you're more than welcome to post comments, ask us more questions, so we can just really explore those things. This week, we're going to be tackling another interesting question, another good question. It is, can you be a Christian and not try to live a good life? I think so. Can you be a Christian and not really be that good is the question, I suppose. And it's a tough one, but I'm going to open that up and ask Damien, maybe if you could start for us answering that question. I'm going to listen intently on this one.
Cool. All right. Well, good to see you guys. And yeah, I had quite a lot of feedback from the video we posted last week. So if you're watching this and you've got a question that you'd like to ask, just post it underneath, and we'd love to tackle that in the future. Can you be a Christian and not live a good life? That's a good question. I think the way I would tackle answering this question is by saying lots of people understand different things about the term Christian. So what is a Christian is basically how I'd like to tackle this just to begin with. So some people think being a Christian is living in a country that is, has a Christian heritage. Some people think being a Christian is being christened as a child by your parents, or having a vague belief in God, or being just a nice person. So there's loads of different definitions of Christian, but the definition of Christian in the Bible is something different to all of those things. So my understanding of Christian when I read the Bible is that when a person comes to faith in Jesus, so there's two things. There's like repenting, which is like turning away from the life you lived, and the way of life that you used to live, and that's like recognizing that there's stuff that we do that God isn't pleased about, and deciding in order to follow God that we're going to turn away from a few things. So repenting, and then believing, which is putting our trust in Jesus for the forgiveness of our sins. Everybody's sin. The Bible says everyone has fallen short. So there's no kind of Christian, I've made it, or I'm a really amazing person, look at me. All of us recognize that we've fallen short and we need God's forgiveness, just like somebody with a disease needs a doctor, somebody who has sinned needs forgiveness. And what Jesus did on the cross was he took our place, and all of the punishment that we deserve for the things that we've done wrong fell on him, which meant that we could be forgiven completely, not just forgiven legally, but the stain of all of the shame and the regret and stuff that builds up in our hearts be washed away, a brand new start. In fact, Jesus talked about it being like we're born again. So it's like the deepest part of us, the bit that connects to God, coming alive as God puts his life in us through the Holy Spirit. So I think being a Christian is more than just going to church, more than reading books, more than singing songs, more than even just reading the Bible. It's actually a relationship with God through Jesus, and it's the most amazing thing on the earth. So the question is, can you be a Christian and not try to live a good life? And here's my answer. If you're genuinely a Christian, if you have really come alive because God has put his spirit in you, then trying to live by rules and regulations means that we have to, and a lot of people don't want to. But when God gives you a brand new heart, you want to. And so if you're a Christian, you want to do the things that please him. So you don't do it to make him love you. He already loves you. Because he loves you, you want to live a good life. It doesn't mean we always do. It doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean, that we're more loving than other people. Hopefully, people can look at the church and see that we are loving. But I think if you're really a Christian in the way that the Bible defines it, you want to live a good life. That's how I'd answer that question.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Pete, have you got anything to add to that, mate?
Well, that was such a good answer. I'm not sure I've got too much to say, really, but I do agree totally. I think that is really important, that if you give your heart to Jesus, if you give him your life, then that would mean wanting to become more like him and live the life that he's prepared for you. And if you have haven't. Yeah, so that you can, if you have done that, you can't then not try to live a good life, if that makes any sense at all. But I mean, it does remind me. I did hear once, and I can't remember where I read it, but there was an evangelist in America, and he was preaching, and there was a guy who was a gangster, a mob leader, who became a Christian, but he thought, in his understanding, well, you've got Christian dentists, Christian doctors, Christian sportsmen. I can be a Christian gangster. And so he called himself a Christian, and he went to church, and he probably had a Bible in his house, but he didn't change his life at all, because he thought he could just carry on living the life he had before, and with blackmail and robberies and goodness knows what. And somebody had to go, and some very brave person had to go and explain to him that was not the way it worked. If you have given your life to Jesus, you will be wanting to live a life that he wants for you, that is full of quality, and great times, but you will be wanting to live your life much more like him. If you're genuinely a Christian, why wouldn't you want to live a good life?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Can I just I'll come at a slightly different angle. There's a couple of things I want to sort of talk about here. First thing is, the one thing that I find the Bible gives an incredible reality is that people carry on acting like people in the Bible, and God carries on acting like God. Often I remember reading quotes and various questions from atheists, sort of looking at the Bible and going, well, these people aren't that good. And that's the point. They're broken people in a broken world. So they can't, it's impossible to live without sin. The Bible does tell us that if you live without doing bad, I suppose, then you are fooling yourself. And I think so. The reality is that it's dealing with a broken world. It's dealing with people who are sadly sort of caught in this sin trap, if you like. But there's a way out through Jesus, and that's through repented life, and through trusting that he is the one that's dealt with all the past and the stuff that you've done. But so what an incredible book that is. It shows reality as we experience it. I could challenge you and say everybody that we've dealt with has probably, in some sort of levels, has hurt us at some point and has caused us pain. And I suppose the other part is, what is good versus bad? So there's a relative term, isn't there? The theory of relativity says we've got to measure against something to work out what is good and what is not good. And the measurement here we're talking about, I guess, in Christian terms, is we're measuring ourselves against God. And the important thing to understand here is, when we measure ourselves against God, the creator of the universe, as we probably explored last week, and there's probably more questions that could be raised about what we discussed last week. If we're measuring ourselves against him, we fall well short, all of us, me included. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a cut above anybody else by being a Christian. And I think that's really important to hear as well. It's actually, I just understand my predicament as a Christian. I know that I've got myself in a bit of trouble through my own actions, and I need rescuing from that trouble. And so the key thing then is the cross. Jesus's death on the cross is a substitution for my sin, my problems and my issues. Jesus didn't deserve that. We see that he lived the good life, and when he's measured against God, he's not falling short. He's actually equal with God. And so that's why it's important for a Christian, I guess, if they follow that person who is ultimately good, by implication, they have become good, because it's been imposed on them by their own faith. Genuine Christian, as Damien and yourself have mentioned, Pete. So I think that's quite important as well. So we understand what good is in reality. And I think the danger we can have as Christians is to think, well, okay, if God's forgiven me and he's rubbed out all that stuff from my past, then I can carry on doing what I like. A little bit like your free, the person who decided that they could still be a gangster and extort money. And I think the reality is that's not true either. You see, if we are transformed by God and we know that this person Jesus has done these things, there's a spiritual reality that comes into our life, and that changes us fundamentally from the core. And when we change from the core, we want to be more like the person we follow. And if we are Christians, that person we follow is Jesus. So I think, you could almost say, well, if I'm forgiven, then I can do whatever I like because God will keep on forgiving me. And I can just keep on coming back to the cross. But I think the danger is good and evil, or good in this case, leads us to a healthy life and a healthy place to be with God. Evil takes us down a route that draws us further away from God. So the danger is if you think, well, I can just carry on doing what I like, you are always drawn away from God every time that you ignore what he's asking you to do. So can you be a Christian and not do good? To me, it's the wrong way round. When I become a Christian, by implication, I become good by Christ. And therefore, I want to continue on that path, is probably the way. So it's motivation, rather.
Yeah. Can I just chip something in as well?
Yep.
So when I was 18 when I became a Christian, and 18, not 80, even though I've got lots of grey hair. And I remember somebody trying to explain to me the distinction between being religious and having a faith in Jesus. So the Bible does say there's a kind of religion that God really loves, and that's to care for the orphans and the widows, the vulnerable. But a lot of people understand religion as like, if I go to this place or I read this holy book or if I sing these hymns, that somehow makes me a Christian. And they think if I try really hard to be a good person and obey lots of laws and regulations and things, then I'll be a Christian. So this is how I try and explain it, and this is how it was explained to me, that religion in that sense is trying to impose a change of behavior from the outside. So it's kind of, if I do all of these external things and follow all of these rules and regulations and change my behavior, then I've become a Christian, or I am a Christian. Whereas Christianity, like real Christianity, is how God changes our hearts. He comes into our lives. It's not an external thing, it's an internal thing. And he changes our internal world through, with his presence. He literally comes into our lives and gives us a brand new set of motives and ambitions. And so instead of having to do all of these things externally to change our behavior, suddenly we do change because our hearts changed, and our behavior does change, but not because of some external thing, but because of an internal transformation that God's made in us. So the difference between religion and true faith in Jesus is one's from the outside and the real thing is from the inside. And so when somebody comes to me and says, but surely, religions have caused all of the wars in the world. And I say, well, probably, because when you divorce religion from true faith in Jesus, it can become one of the most destructive forces on earth. Like religion without a love for God and faith in Jesus is just human effort and judgment and, self-righteousness. And it's a horrible thing if it's only on its own. Lots of people have religion without a faith in Jesus. Lots of people go to church or call themselves a Christian. But when you're connected to Jesus and he's changing your heart a little bit every day into his likeness, then you want to do good because you want to please him. And because that's your natural tendency now that your heart's been changed. So I think there's a distinction there as well between trying to be religious and trying to do it all ourselves and actually allowing God to change our hearts from the inside out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And I think it is a real danger, isn't it? If we start thinking like, sort of we can get away with it. And it's almost like, I remember there was a mathematician called Pascal. He's a French guy. And he basically believed because the option of not believing was worse. And I also want to say, I don't believe that is a faith. That's just a logical choice. There is some logic, of course, involved in what we believe, but I think it does move from our head to our heart, and that is the transformation that I think we could say. I've thought through this, and I've kind of counted all of these things and looked at it, but actually, it's only until it moves me and transforms me from the inside out, that is when I know that I'm kind of in the zone, if you like, with God, because of what he's doing in me rather than me trying to do things outside of myself. Yeah. Brilliant. Is there anything else, guys, you want to add to that before we sum up?
I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking, but just one thought just crossed my mind. When Jesus called people to follow him, when you read it in the Bible, he was always asking people to leave something behind in order to gain something even more wonderful, and that was following him and having a relationship with him. So I think the invitation still stands today to everyone. Come and follow me. That's what Jesus says. Come and follow me. And it might feel like you're kind of having to leave some things behind and not live, doing all of the things you've done before. But by far what you gain it outweighs the things that you have to leave behind. And it doesn't diminish your life and make it smaller. It actually makes your life bigger and much more joyful and wonderful. So I think having Jesus in my life is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
And I think that the wonderful thing, and this may be the thing to sum up on, is C.S. Lewis has a wonderful quote that so many people are content with eating mud pies, meaning that we continue to do the things that we feel sucked into and need to do, and we're missing out on the trip to the seaside. And I wonder, in the lockdown world, maybe that's an appropriate quote to leave with. Are we eating mud pies, and have we forsaken the trip to the seaside? As a Christian, maybe I need to be more focused on the King and Jesus and his goodness, rather than sucked into all those things that distract me from that, and enjoy the magnificent view that it comes with following Christ and all those wonderful benefits that come about as a result, rather than being sucked into the things that I think fulfill me.
Brilliant.
So I think really another good question this week, and I hope we've kind of answered that for you. If you've got further questions about it, please do post or ask. Just send a text or a Facebook message into one of us, and we'll bring it up again. But I hope you're enjoying hearing these different sessions, and hopefully, by the end of it, you'll have a better idea of where we're at as Christians, what we think, why we might think it. And if you ever do think that you want to find out more and maybe want a trip to the seaside, then get in touch with anyone here, and I'm sure they'd be more than delighted to talk through things with you. But for now, thank you so much for listening. It's been wonderful to share this moment with you, and have a brilliant day, and God bless you all.